Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews. My name is James, and around here I like to explore the world of fountain pens, ink, and paper, and share with you different things that I find that I like, steer you away from some that I think, probably are not worth your time. So today we're going to figure out which one this is. This is the Wing Sung 630. It is a relatively new fountain pen to the market within the last year, and I've been a little bit slow to get it and dip my toes in the water. It's a pen that can be had in gold nib as well as steel nib. I'm going to look at the steel nib version today because I just still can't wrap my mind around a $200 gold nibbed pen from Wing Sung. Maybe that's, closed-mindedness on my part, but I'm not there yet, okay? But steel nibs of their pens I like, and they're usually a good bargain, especially in the 6 series of pens, which, of course, the 630 falls into. So we're going to look at this. It's a piston filler pen. It's got a great big nib. It's a very familiar design, looking a lot like the Montblanc 149 or the X159. And, of course, the question is going to be, is it worth your time? Is it worth your money? Is it a good pen? Well, let's flip the camera and find out. All right, when you get your 630, it comes in this typical Lamy-style box, which of course also includes your filling and cleaning instructions and a reminder to use silicone grease on that piston at the next service. Now, I am not going to completely disassemble the pen today because I already have it inked, but I will likely do a cleaning video of the pen when I get around to the next fill. Now let's take a look at the pen. So the Wing Sung 630 is a big pen. Again, it's the size of a Montblanc 149 or a Jinhao 159. It is a more substantial pen than the X159 from Jinhao. This is a piston pen, so there's some extra weight. It's made, I think, of a denser, higher quality plastic, as I'll show you here in just a second. And so it's just a more substantial pen. It comes at a price, but the price does seem to be proportional to the work and materials extra in the pen. So let's look at those materials. Here is the Wing Sung 630, and this is the Jinhao X159. This is a great pen, and I really do like it. Side by side, you can see that, to my eye, this is a prettier burgundy or maroon color than the Jinhao, and the material then immediately shows some differences as well beyond color. I don't know if this will show up on camera, but when you look at the X159, particularly in this color, you can actually see a bit of the light bleed through from the gold trim inside there. Do you see that? And that just kind of tells you a little bit about the material and things like that. This is a solid colored pen, so you don't expect to really see that on that end cap. I didn't really notice that when I reviewed the pen because that one was black, but in this pen you can see that material difference, and you just see that it doesn't have quite as attractive a burgundy, although again, in isolation, this is a great looking pen. It's just next to the Wing Sung, it does start to lose a little bit. There's also more attention paid to the trim. There's a nice bit of red paint that I think looks really nice in most lighting right here in the trim band, and it's an extra touch, and it just looks a little bit better. This doesn't look bad, but I think that looks just a bit better. But at the finial, of course, you just get that bullet shape or cigar shaped finial. Then you come down to that trim ring, familiar clip, nice and strong, but it does work well. It has a kind of a nice springiness to it, a little bit easier to use than some other pens that I have back there, and that looks good. Trim ring, again, I think that the paint is a nice touch here in that trim ring in those 2 spots, and it looks good. And as you go around the trim ring, of course, it says Wing Sung 630, love it when the model number is on there, and made in China. So not trying to pretend to be anything else. They are exactly what they say they are. It's a Wing Sung. It's made in China. Shouldn't be a surprise to you then when the pen shows up, should it? Anyway, come on down to, actually, let's stop here below the trim ring, because this is something that I look at on a lot of pens because it has to do with comfort, actually, as much as it has to do with the build. This has a really nice, smooth taper. Do you see that? It's well done, and especially for what is essentially a plastic pen, it's done well. You don't see, as you go around on this one, any of those injection molding sort of seams or anything like that. It's well polished, this pen, and this little taper down is done nicely. That matters because when you put the pen in your hand and you write, if the pen happens to fall, as mine does, where that's going to hit your hand, It's the difference between a comfortable pen to write with and an uncomfortable pen, and they got that taper right. Come on down, you have that slight taper to this trim ring, and then finally to that piston knob, which again, I'm not going to twist because the pen does have ink in it, but this is a piston filler, and that means that you turn this knob to expel the air and then turn it back to bring in the ink. It creates that vacuum for those who aren't familiar with piston pens. Let's look at cap turns. It is 1 1.25 turns, so very good. Those of you who like just a few turns, they did that well. And again, looking down in the cap, you can see that there is a plastic liner. Those are plastic threads on plastic threads, by the way. You can see that there is a liner in the pen and a bit of what looks like brass for the attachment of the finial. The pen does post very securely, and listen, no rattles, nothing, very, very good. And before we get to the nib, I want to show you that it does have an ink window, and look how generous and clear that ink window is. Some of you have already figured out, I bet, what ink I have in this pen. That is very easy to see what the level is. I'm down to just about half, or maybe a little bit less than half of a fill at the moment. I've been writing with it quite a bit, but it's very easy to know exactly what you've got. It's easy to look in there and maybe figure out what ink if you've forgotten that, because, you know, some of us do. The grip section is nice and generous, as you would expect from a pen of this size. It's comfortable. Those threads don't bother me. There really isn't a step down there. Just a really nice, comfortable pen in hand. Great if you like a larger pen but don't like to write with it posted. And this is a sizable pen and very well balanced. I would say just about perfect balance there with the pen filled and unposted. With the pen posted, well, of course, you feel the weight of that large cap, but I don't find it uncomfortable at all, and I write with it both ways. It doesn't matter to me. Perfectly good that way. Right, now that brings us to the business end of this pen, which is a big nib, and to appreciate the size of this, you almost have to see it in person. I mean, you can kind of see, this is the flashlight on my key ring. It's an O light, getting lots of wear there, and look at the size of the nib compared to that keychain LED flashlight. It's really, that's a big nib. Since some of you do have the Jinhao number 8 nib, I might as well get that out. It's a longer nib than that Jinhao, and that is a big nib on this pen. Now my example here is a fine nib, and I find that it writes kind of like a Western fine. We'll see that here in just a second. Typical Wing Sung detailing, a little bit of scroll work in the silver part of the nib, and then that Wing Sung pen logo that always reminds me of propellers on a plane. I do wish they had put that it is a fine on here. I prefer for nibs to always have some indication of what they are, because to be honest, sometimes when you're looking at 20 pens out on the desk, you're not sure if it's not written on that nib until you get to writing. So those are the main features and design of the pen. I think it looks great overall. Of course, it's a classic and familiar shape and design, so not anything groundbreaking, but well done. And for my example, a well put together and well made pen. All right, for our size comparison, of course, we have that Jinhao 630, and then here is the Lamy All-Star. And then we have the Wing Sung 699, a little bit longer, but smaller in diameter, and that is also a piston filler pen. And then here's the Wing Sung 601, inspired by the Parker 51. And then here are the pens in their posted lengths, and you will notice very similar in length to that Lamy All-Star or the Safari as well, shorter than the 699 or its Pilot Inspiration, and then, of course, much bigger in every possible way than the Wing Sung 601. Now here we have the caps in their unposted lengths, and I always include this because look how much of that gap just closed. All of these pens suddenly are very similar in length. Now certainly very different in their diameter, but very similar in length, and that can be surprising when 3 of these pens are so much longer than, for example, that Wing Sung 601. So it really does pay to consider both the posted and unposted lengths when you're considering purchasing a pen, because there can be quite a difference in how the pen looks, feels, and is ergonomically fit to you, depending on whether it's posted or unposted. We have the Wing Sung. This is a fine nib. Wetness, not bad at all. Ink today, probably not what you expected because, sometimes we get a little bit matchy-matchy with our inks and pens, so ox blood would have been a thing. However, this grip section is too big to fit in my ox blood bottle, so had to go another way. I didn't have one of those ink saver things around at the time to deal with that, so I just picked an ink with a bigger bottle opening that I had been wanting to use anyway. And what is this ink? Sharp eyes probably already figured it out. It is Noodler's and is now called Southwest Sunset. Great ink, very popular a few years ago. We used to see this ink just all over the place, and I think it still rates pretty highly on best-selling inks with some stores. Known for that really vibrant shading and color variation that you can see there. Really a neat color ink. Maybe odd for this pen, but a great ink. The pen, as you might hear, is not scratchy at all, but does have just a little bit of audible, smooth pencil-like feedback. That never bothers me at all. Bonus points for those who know the connection between those words. Do our speed test and see how this works out, whether or not it can keep up with fast writing. All right, the only thing I see right here, there was a little bit of a loss of the line. It seems like there might have been, it was all right here. There were a couple of times where I think it did, but that may be it. I don't really see anything else. Kept up really well, of course, in the beginning. Got over here, lost just a little bit right there. Not a big deal. Not a big deal in normal writing. I'm not having any trouble with the pen at all. And we'll say this particular Noodler's ink, I find that sometimes it kind of just dries out a little bit more quickly than a lot of inks, but I haven't had dry out problems with this pen so far. Right. Who's ready for the dad joke this week? There you go. That was a waste of time, wasn't it? So what do I think about the Wingsung 630? Here's what I found. I think the materials look terrific for a pen in this range. It really is, I think, a good value. It is at the more affordable end of the fountain pen market, but it's not, just a cheap throwaway pen. I do think you get what you pay for in that price range. The piston mechanism is working very well. The pen is really good and solid. It has a nice weight and heft to it. And the craftsmanship for this kind of a pen seems to be quite good. The nib writes well. This is a fine. I think it writes quite well for a fine. Again, a bit more to the Western fine end of things than, say, to the Japanese end of things, but that's typical for a Wingsung pen. The piston mechanism for me so far is working great. Be aware it's not going to fit in those smaller diamine bottles, so have a workaround for that if there's an ink there that you want to be able to use in this pen. As far as negatives, the only thing I would say is it is just yet another cigar-shaped pen, but you can say that about a lot of different pens and pen companies and models from a lot of different countries. That's just the state of the market. There's a lot of cigar-shaped pens. So nothing groundbreaking, nothing original, but a good, solid value and a good pen. And if you like a big nib, this one even trumps that Jinhao X159 or even the 9019 that just came out in terms of nib size. And it kind of hits a nice sweet spot in between those two pens in other ways. Again, you can buy a few Jinhao X159s for the price of this pen, but you're getting a more solid pen with this one, and you're getting a piston filler with a really good ink window. So, do I recommend the pen? Yes, so far it's working great. If anything happens and it goes wrong, I will definitely let you know about that and pin a comment below. But so far so good. I'm enjoying the pen, and so far I could definitely recommend this as one that you might want to check out. Really neat pen. And with that, here's my question. If you have the choice between this or the very popular 601A or that Jinhao X159, which pen are you going to get? And especially if you own one of these pens, which pen would you recommend? And if you don't like this question, let me give you a bonus. What's your favorite clash of pen and ink combo? You get a pen, you don't matchy-matchy. Instead, you put in an ink that has nothing to do with the color of the pen. What's your favorite clash combo of pen and ink? And with that, God bless you and hope you have a great week. And thank you for all those likes, shares, and subscribes. They mean a lot and they help the channel.